How modern do you think your accounting standards are? Probably not as modern as you think. This is the IssuesWatch podcast. Hello, and welcome to the IssuesWatch podcast. I'm Matt Charne, your host for this week's accounting and auditing episode. I'm an audit director at Clifton Larson Allen. Joining me today, as always, is Marissa Flood, Assurance Senior at CLA. Welcome back, Marissa.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. This episode qualifies for Nano CPE credit. If you're interested in earning CPE credit for this episode, hit the pause button now and head over to njcpa.org/nano to find out how. Quick disclaimer, the views and statements expressed herein are our own and not necessarily those of the NJCPA or of CLA. Okay, so I mentioned modernization, and we have a couple articles today that kind of edge on the same topic of just modernizing things, which I think is a good thing. The first one is some updates to the peer review standards, which haven't been updated in a little bit, as we'll see as we go through the details. And then another one from the ISCPA's Professional Ethics Executive Committee, if I got that right.
Tongue twister.
Yeah, I had to look up what PEEC stood for right before we started rolling. That claims that these standards haven't been updated in almost 20 years, which is pretty shocking.
Yeah, and especially with, think about all the developments we've had in the last 5 years with technology and everything. It's kind of
staggering.
Kind of shocking.
Yeah. So this will be a good one to kind of get things up to speed. But let's start with peer reviews so we can get that out of the way first. So the article reads here that the AICPA Peer Review Board is proposing updates to, again, modernize, our word of the day, the administration requirements for peer reviews. So as I was reading through the details here, it doesn't sound like they're going to change exactly the content of your checklists or what exactly you're supposed to be looking at when it comes to peer reviewing other audits, but more or less who's responsible for peer reviews and what those organizations might look like. Mm-hmm. The first thing that it kind of points out is there's been some scrutiny from bodies like the PCAOB and the SEC, which is interesting because I think recently they have delayed their own quality management standard implementations, and the AICPA has not.
Yes, they did push that back.
That being said, these bodies have been saying the peer review teams for AICPA-centered audits, so maybe firms who don't do a lot of public company work or don't work with a lot of financial institutions, things like that, are still, and I quote, needing the experience with quality control and regulatory environments, end quote. And so basically what these standards that the AICPA has proposed is saying, well, if your peer review team is going to work on a peer review, you need to also have these quality management standards set in place. And then we know that you know how to look at quality management standards that are now required in all of these other firms.
Yes.
So I just found it interesting that the PCAOB was the one that kind of pushed that initiative and then themselves said, oh, but for, our reviews in our firms, not that they're totally separate, but we're not going to check that yet.
Yeah,
so I'm wondering if they're trying to see how this goes before they put their own, quality management stuff through. That being said, there was something else that kind of popped out of this, which was the rise of private equity investment, basically. And so obviously the firms that work on public company audits and get regulated through the PCAOB, they have a magnifying glass on them at all times, right?
Yes.
And making sure that those public audits are done correctly. Now, through these standards, that similar kind of magnifying glass is going to be put, it sounds like, onto firms that have private equity investment as well.
Which, in practice,
it's never a bad thing.
Never a
right?
bad thing, in my opinion.
It's more work, which could be a bad thing.
Which
but
could be viewed as more of a difficult
from a regulation standpoint, typically keeps things in check.
Yes.
And so the reason that they called out private equity investments was because there's potential conflicts of interest, potential diminished service quality, which is interesting, and then a challenge to independence and objectivity, which could be true in certain situations, but I feel like those are more few and far between if you are running a practice that really set up correctly from the get-go.
Okay.
So this potential conflict of interest, I feel like that makes sense depending on what else this private equity portfolio was invested in, what else the firm kind of works on, and things like that. This diminished service quality I found interesting because that is kind of almost like a jab at these firms that have went to private equity and saying, you're at a higher risk of diminished service than someone who's owned by their partners, which I found interesting because a lot of firms that go to private equity do so because they feel like it frees them up to service clients better.
Yeah.
I can hear arguments both ways, certainly, but a lot of the arguments that I've heard just in my passing by when it comes to going through PE is that, well, we don't have to worry about like too much going out and gathering funding. If we needed that, we don't have to worry about plugging in some kind of investment to move up in the kind of technology that we can use in order to support what our teams are doing and all the different services that are going to go through the firm. And they kind of just say that, well, we got a PE investment, so we're going to use that to modernize and, again, word of the day, and kind of make sure that we have all the tools that we need to keep up with what's going on in the market and the environment.
Yeah, I wonder if they're looking at it from a standpoint of, like you said, they don't have to have their hands in as many things. So maybe the lack of having their hands in certain things that they no longer have to do. I don't know. But you're right. That, to me, that's
certainly, yeah.
That's an interesting one.
I wanted to point that one out.
Reads more like a dig.
It does, at least in this summary that I have here. But who knows? Maybe the AICPA is a little nervous about all this money coming into the industry and thinking, well, let's make sure that these guys that get bought out, like you said, are paying attention to what they're doing still and not just kind of flipping the autopilot switch.
If anything, keeping them vigilant.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So one of the other kind of criteria that comes from this is that I believe this was already a requirement, so this isn't the new part, but firms that work with the PCOB and do public company audits, their peer reviews have to be administered by the National Peer Review Committee. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like anyone with and I'll use quotes here, an elevated risk profile also now needs this National PRC peer review. And I think that's where this kind of team captain requirements that I was talking about before kind of come into play. And it sounds like they're kind of putting their finger and saying, if you're PE, you might be falling under this elevated risk profile. So this is just an exposure draft. The comments are actually due fairly soon at the end of October 25th, 2025. And this is one of the quicker turnarounds, I guess, because it's not a FASB ASU.
Yeah.
But if approved, the revisions will take effect for years on or after December 31st, 2025. So any peer reviews that occur in 26 and beyond will be under these new requirements here. And again, not too much change to what the peer review checklists are and how that process would normally go, but more so who's responsible for making sure those reviews happen and trying to see who is listed as this elevated risk profile.
Yeah, no, and I'm interested to see, because like you said, there's not a ton of change, which to me, I appreciate when there's not, a crazy standard coming out with a ton of change. So I do really like how they are modernizing these things with, not much complexity in the modernization, in my opinion, but enough that we are seeing things that we've had come, like the quality management standard that's going to be, coming into effect. So I really like how they're kind of starting to tie everything in together.
Exactly. Yeah, and like we said, modernization, the word of the day, and there were some other standards that kind of came out today, or recently as well, I shouldn't say today specifically, which were these new ethics guides. I'll let you kind of take the lead on this one.
Yeah.
Because as I read through this article, my first thought was,
Matt has some opinions.
This kind of sounds exactly like what we had before, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah, no, we will definitely be discussing. The AICPA Professional Ethics Executive Committee, say that 5 times.
I couldn't.
Shortened PEEC. They recently released an updated guidance in the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct, and it is the AICPA Professional Ethics Simultaneous Employment and Associated with Attestation Clients. So
say that 10 times fast.
That is a tricky one. So there's a new definition of simultaneous employment, and the term simultaneously employed or associated now refers to situations where covered members that are employed or associated with an attest client at the same time are no longer allowed to do the worker be associated. So this includes employment in any capacity, full-time, part-time, temporary,
Right.
And then association through roles such as board membership, advisory positions, and influential capacities. So I actually...
Yeah, I'll stop you there for
Yes.
a second, because everything that we read off, that this is exactly how the article describes the new kind of standard. And to me, hearing it now for the third time almost, it sounds exactly the same as what we used to have.
Yes. So
You could never be employed by your audit client or your attest client, at least not to my knowledge. If you were on a board position, maybe you could get away with that, but not really if you're influencing the decisions that the board is making. So if you don't have a vote, it was an independence violation anyway.
You are right. It's all about modernization, Matt. It's all about modernization.
I guess so.
We have since practiced. We do practice restrictions around simultaneous employment and association,
Right.
and everything like that. Because I was reading the same thing, and I'm like, okay, I don't really know what I'm missing here. So independence is still a core principle.
Right.
Covered members are still prohibited from holding roles with attest clients and impairing objectivity and independence.
Yep.
And then it says key positions at the client, like CFO, controller, are obviously off limits. Okay, yeah, that all stays the same. Right.
Okay.
So
what exactly are we
I then
modernizing?
looked into what's new and what is clarified, because I was a little bit unsure too. So
Right.
the term simultaneously employed or associated now includes board memberships, advisory roles, which we said, and non-traditional associations.
Okay.
And then gig economy roles and independent contractor arrangements, which is part of the modernization.
Right.
And then one that I'm still a bit iffy on, and I know that they're coming out with more interpretation of it, is volunteer positions that may influence financial reporting.
Okay.
So I don't believe that it's, you go to your local food bank and spend an hour there, they happen to be a client. I don't think that that's necessarily what they're talking about.
I would hope not.
I would very much hope not, but there are some caveats into the volunteering section as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like the modernization piece, the most important thing that I'm gleaning from this is coming from where and when, you might be associated with something, but you're not fully an employee.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of that stuff comes up these days because we can work remote, we can kind of get stuff done a lot quicker if we use AI tools or different programs, and maybe you have access to a program that a certain nonprofit or other organization that maybe you work with through your firm does not have access to, and you say, well, can you use this tool to help us organize certain things?
Yes.
Maybe those kinds of things are being a little more scrutinized at this point.
Yeah, no, this is definitely going to be a stricter standard than we've seen in the past. In my head, I feel like not much has changed.
Yeah.
And I
If
know
you
in
were
your head,
following
not much has changed.
I would still agree. If you're following your independence rules before, I think you'd still be okay with this. If you need to look up what these new guidance rules might be kind of talking about, if you're looking at certain things that you might be doing on the side or certain things that you kind of writing the line beforehand,
Yes.
odds are this might affect you.
And there's like a new reporting requirement, so if you are intending to accept employment or some kind of association,
Right.
that has to be disclosed now. There's some exceptions for independent contractors and military service obligations and non-key volunteer roles right here. Okay, so here it clears it up a little further down the line. Non-key volunteer roles, that is an exception. So,
Gotcha.
I mean, if you're the one putting together a big volunteer fundraising event and bringing in money and maybe having a say in it, I would maybe say that might be more key than just showing up to a food bank.
Right.
I don't know. But they will be coming out with a little bit more clarity there.
I'm sure. And these are effective next year.
Yes, they're
So
effective
towards the end of 2026.
in
I think.
2026. Yep.
Okay, so we will hopefully have some more information at that point.
Yeah, but I'm happy. It's 20 years old guidance that they are now kind of modernizing.
I know, right?
So we are excited, and we're looking forward to kind of seeing what
I'm
comes out
excited to
there.
see if they clarify what's actually changing.
Me too.
Anyway, in closing, I encourage you to register for the Society's annual Accounting and Auditing Conference on October 22nd. The session's topics will include audit sampling, a CECL update, preparing for your peer review, the new QMS standards, and my session on scoping, risk assessment, and internal controls. There's even a 20% discount if your company registers 4 or more people. Check it out at njcpa.org/conferences. And for a list of upcoming New Jersey law and ethics presentations, visit njcpa.org/ethics. Thank you for watching or listening.